Eye of the Storm by George A. Chesster. Chapter 1. The Drizzle Sets the Stage. It was a typical drizzly afternoon in London, the kind where the rain didn't pour but rather lingered, turning every surface into a reflective canvas for the city's endless grey skies. Water collected in shallow pools on the streets, rippling under the hurried footfalls of commuters and tourists alike. The air smelled faintly of damp stone and roasted chestnuts from a vendor stationed near the Thames, his cart standing resilient against the moisture that clung to everything. Among the bustling crowds moving through the city like a well-orchestrated dance, 5 individuals unknowingly gravitated toward the same destination, the London Eye. The Great Wheel loomed above the city, a modern relic that promised breathtaking views of London's sprawling majesty. It stood still for a moment, a rare sight, as maintenance workers in neon vests adjusted unseen mechanisms, their muffled voices swallowed by the persistent drizzle. Somewhere in the throng of ticket holders, a woman in her 70s adjusted her spectacles and frowned at the slow-moving queue. Daphne Hawthorne, an avid reader of Whodunits, tapped her cane against the pavement impatiently. She wasn't thrilled about this outing, suspended in the air like some sort of sightseeing pigeon, but her niece had insisted that she needed to get out more. And so, against her better judgment, she found herself here, waiting to step inside a giant glass capsule that would carry her into the sky. Nearby, Jerry Price, a comedian whose career was in a perpetual state of just about to take off, studied his fellow passengers. He didn't mind being stuck on the Eye. It gave him fresh material. A Ferris wheel full of strangers? That was the kind of setup that could turn into something truly funny, or at least mildly entertaining. A few steps away, Vanessa Storm, her name conveniently suiting her social media brand, checked her reflection in her phone's camera, adjusting her sleek bob as she spoke into the device.
All right, guys, we are about to go live in the most iconic place in London. The view is going to be insane.
She chirped, blissfully unaware of the growing line behind her. Carl Evans shifted uncomfortably as he clutched a heavy briefcase to his chest, his fingers pressing against the cold metal clasp. He was not a tourist. He wasn't here for the view or for entertainment. No, Carl had work to do, serious work, and being trapped in a capsule full of strangers was an unforeseen complication. He muttered under his breath as the line crept forward. And then there was Sheila, the ride's operator. A woman of few words, Sheila performed her job with a mechanical precision that suggested she'd been doing this for far too long. Every shift blurred into the next, each rotation of the wheel as predictable as the tide. But today, something felt different. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the air held a strange charge. As the final boarding call was announced, the 5 strangers stepped inside the capsule, the doors sealing behind them with a soft hiss. The wheel began to move. They were off. Chapter 2. Meeting the Cast. The capsule ascended smoothly, the hum of its mechanisms blending with the distant murmur of London's streets below. Raindrops clung stubbornly to the glass, distorting the city's vast skyline as it stretched toward the horizon. Inside, 5 strangers stood awkwardly, each taking in their surroundings in their own way. Daphne adjusted her spectacles, her sharp eyes flitting between her fellow passengers. She had always been an observant woman. Decades of reading mystery novels had trained her to notice the smallest details. A slight twitch of the fingers, a darting glance, a nervous tick. She often played a game with herself, guessing the professions of strangers based on their mannerisms. She turned her attention to the man nearest to her, a lanky fellow with unkempt hair and a face that seemed perpetually on the verge of breaking into a smirk. He wore a hoodie over a graphic tee that read tragic, comedy, a life story, and his fingers tapped idly against the railing.
Comedian?
Daphne asked, more to herself than to him.
Yeah, how'd you know?
Jerry Price turned, startled.
The way you watch people. Like you're collecting material.
Guilty as charged. What can I say? Life's a joke, and I'm just the guy taking notes.
Jerry grinned, pulling out a small notepad.
I just hope you're funny.
Ouch,
Jerry said, placing a hand over his heart.
but fair.
A soft chime rang as Vanessa spun in place, angling her phone camera for the perfect shot.
Guys, check this out. The city looks so dreamy in this rain.
She cooed, speaking into the camera.
And this light, flawless.
She tossed her hair back, the motion carefully practiced.
Are you live streaming inside a capsule?
Jerry leaned over.
Obviously, my followers expect updates.
Right? Because they'd be lost without knowing you're currently 50 feet above the Thames.
Daphne smirked at their exchange, while Carl, who had been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably in the corner, gripping his briefcase with white-knuckled intensity.
You okay there, briefcase guy?
Vanessa raised a perfectly sculpted brow.
What?
Carl blinked at her.
You look like you just swallowed a lemon.
Jerry snorted.
Yeah, man, what's in there? State secrets? Stolen crown jewels?
Carl's grip tightened.
Nothing, just business documents.
Carl let out a slow breath, clearly unwilling to engage in conversation. The final passenger, Sheila, remained near the capsule's door. As the ride's operator, she was supposed to be supervising the journey, but something about her stance felt off. She was tense, eyes flicking toward the emergency panel as if expecting it to light up at any moment. Daphne noticed.
You seem nervous, dear.
Sheila startled.
What? Oh no, I'm just making sure everything runs smoothly.
Daphne tilted her head, unconvinced. As the capsule rose higher, an uneasy silence settled over them. Outside, the city stretched in all directions, vast and endless. But inside, the space felt smaller by the second. Something about this group, this moment, felt unnatural. Then, without warning, the capsule jerked violently, sending Vanessa stumbling into Jerry. A flicker of panic crossed Sheila's face as she reached for the control panel. The London Eye had come to a stop. They were trapped. Chapter 3, The Murder Most Foul. For a moment, the capsule was silent, save for the faint hum of the city below and the muted tapping of rain against the glass. Each of its 5 occupants remained frozen, processing the abrupt halt of the great wheel. Then, the tension shattered.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me.
Vanessa groaned, her phone camera still in hand.
This better not mess with my signal.
She frantically tapped at her screen.
Well, folks, this is how horror movies start. 5 strangers stuck in an enclosed space, cut off from the world. If this were a film, the creepy music would start right now.
Jerry spread his arms.
This isn't a joke. Someone needs to fix this.
Carl, still gripping his briefcase like a lifeline, muttered under his breath. He turned to Sheila, the only one remotely close to being in charge.
You work here, do something.
Sheila's jaw tightened.
I don't control the wheel. I operate it from the boarding platform. If something's wrong, it has to be handled externally.
She pressed a button on the emergency panel, her finger lingering for a response. Nothing. Her shoulders stiffened. She murmured.
So what, we just wait?
Carl exhaled sharply, frustration brewing beneath his nervous demeanor. Daphne, who had remained quiet up until now, adjusted her spectacles and studied the group.
Patience, young man. Panicking won't help. It's likely just a technical issue.
Daphne's voice was calm. Jerry leaned against the railing.
Well, if we're stuck, we might as well make ourselves comfortable.
He tapped the glass.
On the bright side, we have an incredible view.
But before anyone could respond, the moment twisted into something far more sinister. A scream sliced through the capsule. Vanessa had turned, her face drained of color. Her phone clattered to the floor, forgotten. Her shaking hand pointed toward the far end of the capsule. There, slumped in an awkward heap, was a man. No one had noticed him before. He had been quiet, too quiet. A businessman, by the looks of his tailored charcoal suit, his posture unnaturally still. And beneath him, a dark pool of crimson spread outwards, staining the floor. For a split second, the world stood still. Then chaos erupted.
Oh my God, he's dead.
Vanessa's voice was a strangled whisper. Daphne gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. Jerry stumbled back, muttering an expletive. Carl's grip on his briefcase tightened until his knuckles turned white. Sheila's expression turned blank, her professional composure giving way to shock. Daphne's mind raced, her decades of crime novels clicking into place like a well-oiled machine. She took a step forward, her aging knees creaking as she approached the body. The man's suit was pristine, save for the blood spreading beneath him. A wound, small but fatal, was nestled just below his ribcage. No gunshot, no sign of a struggle. A clean kill. A murder. And the killer was inside the capsule with them.
Okay, we need to think. What do we do?
Jerry ran a shaky hand through his hair.
I was filming. Maybe I caught something.
Vanessa scrambled for her phone, fumbling to open her camera roll. Carl pressed himself against the glass, his eyes darting from the body to his fellow passengers.
We can't be here. We need to...
Daphne turned sharply.
We're trapped in a sealed capsule above the Thames, young man. We are here, whether we like it or not. The question is, which one of us did this?
The words hung heavy in the air.
This can't be real. I mean, what are the odds?
Jerry let out a weak chuckle. Daphne's voice was calm, yet firm.
Statistically speaking, quite low. And yet, here we are.
Sheila, still standing near the emergency panel, swallowed hard.
We need to.
A static crackle interrupted her. The intercom. Attention, situation, working on it, remain calm. Then just as quickly silence. Daphne inhaled deeply.
Well, at least someone knows we're up here.
And what if the person who killed him is still in here?
Carl's hands clenched into fists.
No if about it, buddy.
Jerry looked around warily. All 5 of them stood still, the weight of realization sinking in. A man was dead, they were trapped, and one of them was a murderer. Chapter 4. Daphne takes charge. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air inside the capsule had turned thick, suffocating. The city below, usually so alive, felt distant, detached, as if they had been severed from reality, suspended in time. Then Daphne took a step forward, her aged but steady gaze sweeping over the group.
Well,
She said, her voice crisp.
I suppose we had better figure out what happened, hadn't we?
Oh, sure. Great plan. Let's all just turn into detectives while we're trapped with a dead body.
Jerry let out a dry laugh. Daphne raised an eyebrow.
Unless you'd prefer to sit here, twiddling your thumbs and waiting for the police to arrive?
Jerry hesitated.
Point taken.
Carl exhaled sharply, shifting his grip on his briefcase.
This is insane. We shouldn't be touching anything. We need to wait for the authorities.
Daphne turned toward him.
Yes, and while we sit here doing nothing, our murderer, who, I might remind you, is still in this capsule, might be planning their next move.
Carl fell silent. Daphne adjusted her spectacles.
Now, let's think logically. This wasn't an accident. This man was stabbed cleanly and precisely. That means the killer had to get close, which also means it was done before the ride stopped.
She turned to Vanessa.
You were filming, weren't you?
Vanessa, still shaken, nodded weakly.
Yeah, I was live streaming earlier.
Daphne instructed.
Then check your footage. If you caught anything that seemed strange, we need to see it.
Vanessa fumbled with her phone, swiping through videos with trembling fingers. Daphne turned to Jerry next.
You like to observe people, don't you?
Jerry blinked.
Well, yeah, but I didn't exactly expect a murder today.
Daphne ignored him.
Think back. Did you notice anything unusual before the capsule stopped?
Jerry ran a hand through his hair, exhaling.
I mean, now that you mention it, I did think it was weird how quiet that guy was. He was already in here when we got on, right?
The group fell into thoughtful silence. Carl frowned.
Yeah, I guess I just assumed he was a tourist, keeping to himself.
Tourists don't usually ride the London Eye in charcoal suits.
Daphne murmured.
He doesn't strike me as someone here for sightseeing.
She turned to Sheila.
You're the operator. Did you notice him?
I don't know. I see hundreds of people a day. He didn't stand out.
Sheila folded her arms. Daphne's eyes narrowed slightly.
And yet he was here before all of us.
Sheila stiffened.
Are you accusing me?
I'm not accusing anyone.
Daphne replied evenly.
Yet.
Vanessa suddenly gasped.
Oh my God.
All eyes turned to her. She held up her phone, her face pale.
I didn't see it before, but look.
She pressed play. The video showed a shaky, rain-speckled view of London as Vanessa had recorded herself speaking to her followers. Behind her, blurred but visible, was the suited man. He was sitting, his posture tense. And then, subtle, almost unnoticeable, someone moved past him. A shadow, a flicker of motion. The camera angle shifted, blocking the view. But in that split second, someone had leaned in close. Daphne's eyes sharpened.
There,
She said.
right there. Someone approached him before he died.
Carl took a step back.
Wait, does that mean...
Daphne's voice was quiet but firm.
The killer is standing in this room with us.
Silence. Outside, the rain intensified, streaking down the glass like cold fingers. Inside, 5 people stared at each other, trust crumbling. No one spoke it aloud, but the thought echoed in every mind. One of them was a murderer. Chapter 5. The interrogations begin. The tension in the capsule was thick enough to choke on. The drizzle outside had turned into a steady rain, tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. 5 strangers stood frozen, their minds racing with the same unspoken thought. Who among them had killed the man in the charcoal suit?
We need answers. And if the police aren't here yet, then we'll get them ourselves.
Daphne cleared her throat, the sound sharp in the silence.
Oh, great. Trapped in a giant glass murder box, and now we're doing a full-on whodunit.
Jerry let out a nervous laugh. Daphne ignored him. She turned first to Carl, her sharp eyes locking onto his white-knuckled grip on the briefcase.
You first, young man.
Carl swallowed hard.
What?
You've been clutching that briefcase like your life depends on it. What's inside?
Carl's grip tightened even further.
I already told you. Business documents.
And why, pray tell, would you bring business documents onto a casual ride on the London Eye?
Daphne raised a brow.
I had a meeting. It finished early, and I thought I'd kill some time before heading back.
Jerry snorted.
Well, you sure killed something, all right?
Carl shot him a glare.
That's not funny.
Daphne's gaze didn't waver.
Open it.
What?
The briefcase. Open it.
Carl's breath came faster.
That's ridiculous. You have no right.
Daphne took a step forward, her wrinkled hands steady.
Young man, a murder has taken place in this capsule, and unless you'd like to be the prime suspect, I suggest you start cooperating.
Carl hesitated. His fingers trembled over the clasps. Then, with a resigned sigh, he unfastened them. The case clicked open. Inside was a stack of documents, real business papers, just as he had said. But nestled between them was something far more interesting. A thick, sealed envelope. Daphne reached in and pulled it out. She turned it over, reading the label. Her lips pursed.
Well.
Vanessa leaned in.
What is it?
Daphne lifted the envelope.
Confidential financial records.
She turned her gaze back to Carl.
And judging by the company logo, I'd say these documents are highly sensitive.
Carl's face had turned a sickly shade of grey.
It's just work.
And yet, our victim was a businessman, well-dressed, professional, perhaps even someone involved in financial dealings.
Daphne's voice was mild, but there was steel beneath it. Carl took a step back.
No, I don't know him.
Are you sure? Because if this murder had anything to do with money, well, that would certainly explain why you look like you'd rather jump out of this capsule than answer my questions.
Carl didn't respond. Daphne tucked the envelope back into the case and turned to her next suspect.
Now,
she said, pivoting.
Vanessa?
Vanessa's head jerked up.
Me? No way. You were recording? Did you see anything?
Daphne questioned.
I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to him. Convenient.
Daphne murmured.
And yet, you conveniently caught just enough footage to suggest that someone approached him before he died.
Vanessa hesitated.
Look, okay, fine. I was kind of hoping to get some good content for my followers, but I swear I didn't see anyone hurt him.
Daphne studied her.
You were live streaming, weren't you?
Vanessa nodded.
Then someone must have been watching. Someone who might have seen more than we did.
Daphne's eyes narrowed.
Oh my God, my chat.
Vanessa blinked. Then her eyes widened.
What?
My followers. The chat. If someone was watching live, they might have noticed something I didn't.
Vanessa exclaimed as she frantically scrolled through her phone, searching her past broadcast for comments. Daphne folded her arms.
Do let us know if any of your adoring fans saw our murderer.
Vanessa muttered under her breath as she scrolled. Meanwhile, Daphne turned to Jerry.
You?
Jerry blinked.
Me?
You claim to be observant.
Yeah, but mostly for jokes, not murder investigations.
Daphne ignored him.
Did you see anything before Vanessa's footage cut out?
Jerry rubbed his chin.
Well, now that I think about it, the guy was acting weird. He wasn't looking at the view. Everyone does that when they get in the capsule, right? But he was just sitting there, stiff, like he was waiting for something.
Waiting. Interesting.
Daphne's mind whirred.
You don't think he knew something was going to happen?
Jerry frowned. Daphne tilted her head.
Or someone.
A shiver ran through the group. Daphne finally turned to the last person left.
Sheila?
Sheila's arms were crossed. Her posture had been rigid ever since the body was discovered.
You disappeared when the ride stopped.
Daphne studied her.
I was trying to fix the emergency line.
Sheila's posture said otherwise.
And yet, you conveniently vanished right when the body was found. How terribly coincidental.
Are you accusing me?
Sheila's eyes darkened.
I am asking questions. You are the one getting defensive.
Daphne didn't blink. Sheila's jaw tightened. For a moment, no one moved. Then the intercom crackled again, static. Then a garbled voice, aware of the situation. Remain in place, authorities on the way. The group exhaled in unison. Daphne stepped back.
Well, it seems we have a bit more time before the police arrive. And in the meantime...
She looked around at the uneasy faces surrounding her.
One of you is going to slip up.
The capsule remained silent. And outside, the wheel stood still, the city oblivious to the storm brewing within. Chapter 6. A Comedian's Insight. The capsule was deathly quiet, save for the soft hum of the city below and the occasional crackle of the malfunctioning intercom. Rain streaked the glass like tiny rivers, blurring the view of London's vast skyline. Inside, 5 strangers stood in tense silence, 5 passengers, but only 4 suspects.
So, I don't want to alarm anyone, but I really don't want to get murdered up here.
Jerry shifted his weight from one foot to the other, rubbing the back of his neck.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Jerry. That's so helpful.
Vanessa shot him a glare. He held up his hands.
Look, I know I joke a lot, but I do pay attention to people. It's kind of my job.
He nodded toward the dead man slumped against the glass.
And that guy? Something was off about him before we even noticed he was dead.
Daphne adjusted her spectacles, intrigued.
Go on.
Okay, so I've done a lot of gigs in clubs, bars, theaters, places where people are very bad at hiding their emotions. And I've noticed that whenever something big is about to happen, people act differently. They get weird, hesitant, tense.
Vanessa crossed her arms.
And?
Before we even realized he was dead, I kept thinking, this guy doesn't look like someone enjoying a casual ride. He wasn't looking at the view, he wasn't scrolling on his phone, he wasn't doing anything normal. He was just sitting there, stiff, like he was waiting for something, or someone.
Daphne's mind whirred.
Waiting for who?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Jerry shrugged. Carl frowned.
Are you saying he knew he was about to be killed?
Jerry rubbed his chin.
Maybe. Or maybe he was meeting someone. Think about it. Why would a guy in a business suit come on the London Eye alone? He wasn't sightseeing.
Vanessa hesitated.
So, you think this was like planned?
Jerry nodded.
It sure as hell wasn't random. Someone was supposed to meet him up here, and whoever it was killed him instead.
A shudder passed through the group. Daphne's gaze sharpened.
That means one of us had a reason to be here before the ride started.
She turned to Sheila. Sheila's jaw tightened.
Oh, for God's sake.
You were the operator. You saw everyone get on this ride, including him. And yet, you claim you don't remember him?
Daphne's voice remained calm. Sheila folded her arms.
I see hundreds of people a day. I don't memorize their faces.
And yet, when things went wrong, you were the first to disappear.
Daphne pressed. Sheila's expression darkened.
I was trying to fix the radio.
Daphne stepped forward.
Or were you trying to hide?
The tension was suffocating. Sheila's fingers curled into fists.
This is ridiculous. I'm not a murderer. Sure. But let's assume for a second that whoever did this planned it. That means they needed an opportunity.
Jerry nodded.
This capsule? Perfect crime scene. No escape. No witnesses outside this group. The murderer knew we'd be trapped, which means they had to be in here when it happened.
Carl let out a slow breath.
So what? It's one of us. That's it?
Daphne folded her hands.
It was always one of us, Mr. Evans. The question is why?
Vanessa chewed her lip.
And how do we even know when it happened? I mean, it's not like any of us actually saw it.
Jerry snapped his fingers.
Exactly. That's the thing. Nobody noticed. And trust me, murder isn't subtle. Someone had to have seen something.
Vanessa hesitated, then checked her phone again.
Hold on. Let me look through my stream again.
She swiped through the video, scrolling through the chat log from her live viewers. Her face paled.
Oh my God.
Daphne peered over her shoulder.
What is it?
Vanessa swallowed hard.
Someone in the chat. They saw something.
She turned her phone so the group could see. A comment stood out among the rest. WTF was that? Did someone just stab that guy? The blood drained from Carl's face. Jerry whistled.
Well, that's unsettling.
Wait, who was that next to him just now?
Daphne's grip tightened on her cane as Vanessa kept reading.
Someone else wrote.
Daphne's voice was quiet but firm.
That means the killer moved in plain sight, and yet none of us noticed.
How the hell is that possible?
Carl rubbed his temples.
Because we were distracted.
The capsule fell into a thick silence. Jerry exhaled.
So what now? We just wait for the cops?
Daphne's gaze flickered to each of them.
No,
She said.
we keep going because we still don't know who the murderer is.
She turned back to Vanessa's phone, replaying the footage in slow motion. Someone had moved. And soon, Daphne was going to find out who. Outside, the rain fell harder. Inside, 5 passengers waited, knowing that one of them wasn't going to leave the capsule as an innocent person. Chapter 7. The Suspicious Operator. The rain pounded against the capsule, streaking the glass in long, uneven lines. Inside, tension pressed down like a lead weight. 5 people, 1 dead body, and a murderer standing among them. Daphne's fingers tapped against the metal railing as she studied the group. One by one, they were unraveling. Jerry masked his nerves with humor. Vanessa's polished influencer facade was cracking. Carl clung to his briefcase like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. And Sheila was tense, too tense. Daphne turned toward her.
You were in charge of this ride, weren't you?
Sheila's head snapped up.
What?
Daphne folded her arms.
You operate the London Eye, you oversee safety, you monitor the capsules, and yet, the second something went wrong, you vanished.
I told you I was trying to fix the radio.
Sheila scoffed. Daphne took a step closer.
And yet, in the middle of a murder, you chose to focus on technical difficulties.
Sheila's jaw tightened.
My job is to keep things running. You want me to ignore a system failure?
Carl let out a shaky breath.
Yeah. Well, the bigger problem is that we have a dead guy in here with us.
Daphne ignored him. Her sharp gaze remained locked onto Sheila.
You didn't just leave to fix the radio, did you?
Sheila's fingers twitched.
What are you implying?
I'm implying that you had a reason to distance yourself.
Daphne's voice was steady.
Maybe you thought that if you weren't near the body when it was discovered, no one would suspect you.
Sheila's face darkened.
You think I killed him?
Did you?
Daphne didn't blink.
No.
Daphne studied her, looking for cracks in her resolve.
Then explain something to me, dear. If you were at the radio panel when the body was found, why didn't you hear anything? No struggle, no movement. Nothing.
Sheila hesitated. The capsule held its breath.
Because I did hear something.
Vanessa gasped.
What?
I heard movement. Right before the capsule stopped.
Sheila ran a hand through her hair.
And you didn't think that was worth mentioning?
Jerry frowned.
I didn't see who it was. I just heard something shift. But by the time I turned around, the ride had already come to a halt.
Sheila clenched her jaw.
Which means the killer acted in the final moments before the capsule stopped.
Daphne nodded slowly. Carl swallowed.
Jesus.
Vanessa glanced at her phone again.
Wait. If it happened right before we stopped, maybe I caught more of it on my stream.
She rewound the video, eyes scanning the screen. Then she gasped.
There.
She pointed at the blurry reflection in the glass.
There's someone standing right next to him.
The group crowded around the phone. The reflection was distorted by the rain, but there was no mistaking it. Someone had been close to the victim. Too close. Daphne's voice was barely above a whisper.
Now we just have to figure out who.
The capsule trembled slightly in the wind, and inside, 5 passengers realized they were running out of time. Chapter 8. Secrets Exposed. Vanessa's hands trembled as she replayed the video, eyes glued to the blurred reflection in the glass. The figure standing next to the victim was indistinct, just a dark shape distorted by rain, but it was someone. One of them. Daphne's sharp eyes flickered between the passengers.
Well, it seems we're getting closer.
Carl took a step back, gripping his briefcase, as if it could shield him from the accusation hanging in the air.
You can't tell who it is from that video.
Jerry exhaled slowly.
No, but we know when it happened now. That narrows things down.
Daphne tapped her fingers against the railing.
And since we have time before the authorities arrive, I suggest we go ahead and clear up a few secrets.
Carl stiffened.
What are you talking about?
Daphne turned toward Vanessa first.
Let's start with you.
Vanessa blinked.
Why me?
Daphne smiled mildly.
You're an influencer, aren't you? Someone who thrives on an audience. And yet you were live streaming something far more sensitive than your usual content.
Vanessa swallowed.
I just wanted to film my ride. That's all.
Daphne raised a brow.
Oh, then why were you recording your fellow passengers more than the view?
Vanessa's face turned red. Jerry snorted.
Oh, come on, Vanessa. We all know you were hoping for some kind of drama to boost your views.
Vanessa's lip curled, but she didn't deny it. Daphne folded her arms.
Were you recording for entertainment, or were you trying to capture something specific?
Vanessa hesitated. Then, in a small voice, she muttered.
I thought the guy looked weird, okay? He was all stiff and paranoid like he was waiting for something. I figured, if something happened, I'd have it on camera.
Carl scoffed.
Unbelievable. You wanted something to happen?
Vanessa glared.
No, I just thought it was odd, that's all.
Daphne nodded thoughtfully.
So you noticed something was off about him?
Vanessa bit her lip.
Yeah, and I wasn't the only one. But...
The group turned.
What do you mean?
Daphne's gaze sharpened.
Carl noticed him too.
Vanessa's voice was quiet. Carl stiffened.
What?
Yes, you did. You kept looking at him. And when the ride stopped, you freaked out more than anyone.
Vanessa's eyes flashed. Daphne's voice was smooth.
Is it?
Carl clenched his jaw.
I don't even know who he is.
Daphne studied him.
And yet, when I searched your briefcase earlier, I found a sealed envelope containing confidential financial records. Documents that I assume weren't meant to be shared so publicly.
Carl's hands twitched.
Tell me the truth, dear. Were those records connected to him?
Silence.
I don't know.
Carl's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Jerry let out a dry laugh.
Oh, sure you don't.
Carl turned to him, eyes blazing.
I don't. I was just carrying the damn documents. I didn't know who they were for.
Daphne took a step closer.
But you suspected something, didn't you?
Carl hesitated. Then finally he exhaled, rubbing his temples.
Fine. Maybe I had a hunch.
Wait, so you did know him?
Vanessa gasped. Carl sighed.
No, I didn't know him. But I knew the kind of people who would be interested in those documents.
Daphne raised a brow.
And?
Carl hesitated. Then in a low voice he muttered.
Those papers, they weren't just business records. They were evidence. Evidence of a fraud scheme big enough to take down some powerful people.
A heavy silence fell over the group. Jerry let out a low whistle.
Well, damn.
Daphne's voice was quiet.
And you think our victim was involved?
Carl shook his head.
I don't know. But if he was, someone might have wanted him dead before those papers got into the wrong hands.
Vanessa shuddered.
So what, you think someone killed him to stop the truth from getting out?
Daphne nodded slowly.
It's a strong possibility.
The group exchanged uneasy glances. Then Jerry cleared his throat.
Okay, well, this is officially the weirdest comedy gig I've ever been part of.
Daphne smirked.
Oh dear, we're not done yet.
She turned to Sheila. The ride operator tensed.
What?
It's your turn, dear.
Daphne's smile was sharp. The capsule swayed slightly as the storm outside intensified. Inside, secrets continued to unravel, and the murderer was running out of places to hide. Chapter 9. The Unexpected Conclusion. The capsule swayed slightly as the wind picked up, the city below shrinking into a rain-slicked blur. Inside, the air had turned electric with tension. Each person had their secrets, but only one had blood on their hands. Daphne's eyes locked onto Sheila, the last person yet to be thoroughly questioned.
You work here. You were supposed to be watching this ride, and yet you claim not to have noticed anything unusual?
Sheila exhaled sharply, her arms crossed.
I told you. I heard movement, but I didn't see who it was.
Daphne stepped closer.
Why were you really at the emergency panel?
Sheila's fingers twitched.
I already told you.
You were checking the systems, but why?
Daphne pressed.
Because if the London Eye was running normally, then why did it stop?
The group fell silent.
Wait,
Vanessa's eyes widened.
are you saying she stopped the ride?
Sheila's face darkened.
That's ridiculous.
Daphne's gaze sharpened.
Is it, or did you stop the ride to trap us?
Carl took a shaky breath.
That would mean...
Jerry whistled low.
That would mean she planned this.
Sheila's jaw clenched.
That's insane.
Daphne tilted her head.
Is it?
The operator's fingers flexed, her posture rigid. Then in a slow, measured voice, she muttered.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Daphne smiled slightly.
Oh, but I think I do.
She turned to Vanessa.
Play the footage again?
Vanessa hesitated, then rewound the video. The blurry reflection in the glass flickered once more.
Right there.
The rain had distorted the image, but one thing was clear. The person standing next to the victim was wearing a uniform just like Sheila's. The group inhaled sharply. Sheila's face turned pale.
That could be anyone.
Daphne shook her head.
No, dear, it couldn't.
Jerry took a step back.
Oh wow, I did not see that coming.
Vanessa swallowed hard.
Wait, but why?
Carl's grip tightened on his briefcase.
I think I know.
He turned to Sheila.
It was about the documents, wasn't it?
Sheila's nostrils flared. Daphne's voice remained eerily calm.
You knew what Carl was carrying, and you knew who was meeting him.
Carl let out a slow breath.
The guy in the suit, he was supposed to be my contact, wasn't he?
Sheila didn't answer. Vanessa's voice trembled.
Sheila, did you kill him?
Sheila's hands curled into fists.
He was gonna ruin everything.
The confession hung in the air like a thunderclap. The group stood frozen. Then Daphne nodded, as if she had expected it all along.
You killed him to cover up the truth.
Sheila's voice was tight with anger.
You don't understand? He wasn't innocent. He was just as guilty as the people behind those documents.
Carl shook his head.
And Noah's dead.
The intercom crackled suddenly. Descending now, stay calm. The capsule jerked. The ride was moving again.
Oh my God, we're getting off.
Vanessa exhaled shakily. Sheila's fingers twitched at her sides. Then suddenly, she lunged right for Carl's briefcase.
Hey, what the hell?
Carl yelped and stumbled back, nearly losing his grip. Daphne reacted first. With surprising speed for her age, she thrust her cane between Sheila's legs, sweeping her off balance. Sheila crashed to the floor, the impact rattling the capsule.
Holy shit, lady.
Jerry blinked.
I may be old, dear, but I'm not slow.
Daphne smiled mildly.
Jesus Christ.
Carl scrambled away, holding onto the briefcase like his life depended on it. Sheila groaned, gripping her wrist where she had fallen, her face twisted in rage.
You don't understand.
Oh, I understand perfectly.
Daphne tilted her head. The London Eye continued its slow descent. Outside, flashing lights were waiting. Inside, the murderer had been unmasked. And Daphne Hawthorne, 72 years old, mystery novel enthusiast, had just solved a real-life crime. She exhaled.
Well,
She murmured.
that was an interesting ride.
The capsule finally touched the ground, and the storm had passed. Chapter 10, Relief Below. The capsule gave a gentle shudder as it finally reached the ground. The London Eye, usually a symbol of wonder and panoramic views, had become a crime scene. The doors hissed open, revealing a crowd of uniformed officers, paramedics, and curious onlookers, all waiting for the passengers to disembark. Daphne adjusted her spectacles, taking in the scene with a calm, knowing expression.
Well,
She murmured.
it seems we've made quite the entrance.
You can say that again.
Jerry let out a shaky laugh. Sheila remained on the floor of the capsule, her wrists now secured behind her back with a set of plastic cuffs, courtesy of the London Eye's security team. Her expression was a mix of fury and resignation.
Oh my God, we actually made it out.
Vanessa exhaled, blinking rapidly, her influencer instincts kicking back in as she lifted her phone.
Wait, should I?
Vanessa, not the time.
Carl groaned. Vanessa hesitated, then shoved her phone into her pocket.
Right, not the time.
As the group stepped out onto the platform, the police wasted no time taking over. Officers swarmed the area, leading Sheila away as she muttered under her breath. Daphne caught a few words. He deserved it. And you don't understand. A detective, a tall man with a neatly pressed coat, approached them. His eyes were sharp and assessing.
I'm Detective Inspector Reynolds. We've been monitoring the situation since the eye stopped. You're the passengers from Capsule 17?
Daphne nodded.
That's correct.
His gaze flicked to Sheila, then back to the group.
And I understand you've had quite the ordeal. That's one way to put it.
Jerry let out a hollow laugh. Reynolds sighed, pulling out a notepad.
We'll need full statements from all of you.
Daphne smiled.
Of course. But I imagine you'll find our story quite compelling.
The detective raised an eyebrow. Jerry smirked.
Oh yeah, old lady detective here solved the whole damn case before you even got the ride moving again.
Reynolds looked at Daphne with newfound interest.
Is that right?
Daphne inclined her head.
A lifetime of reading Agatha Christie does have its benefits.
Reynolds chuckled.
I'll take your word for it.
Paramedics moved in, checking each of them for shock. Carl sank onto a nearby bench, his hands still trembling around his briefcase. Vanessa downed a bottle of water in one go, muttering something about needing a vacation. Jerry clapped his hands together.
Welp. Looks like I've got plenty of new material for my next set.
Daphne gave him a wry smile.
Just remember to credit the detective work properly.
Jerry grinned.
Wouldn't dream of leaving you out, Miss Marple.
Daphne chuckled. The rain had stopped. The city buzzed around them as life moved forward, unaware of the chaos that had unfolded high above the Thames. Reynolds pocketed his notepad.
All right, let's start from the beginning.
Daphne exhaled, the weight of the evening finally settling.
Yes,
She murmured,
let's...
and with that, the case of the Eye of the Storm was officially closed. Epilogue. A week later, Daphne sat in her favorite armchair, a steaming cup of tea resting on the side table. The case had made headlines, and while the others had shied away from the attention, she had found it rather amusing. Vanessa had turned the whole experience into a tell-all video, racking up millions of views. Carl had disappeared from the public eye, presumably back to whatever shady financial world he belonged to. Jerry had, true to his word, turned the entire ordeal into a stand-up routine, and Sheila was in custody, awaiting trial. Daphne flipped through a fresh novel, smiling slightly. For all her years reading about detectives solving impossible crimes, she had never imagined she would become one herself. But, as she took a sip of her tea, she supposed there was a first time for everything. The end.